All right. So this week we pick up with vaYiqra, Leviticus, chapter 23, verse 29. So I'm going to back up to 28 and then move to 29 to 28. You shall not do any of your occupational work on this self same day, because it is a day of the coverings. It, speaking of this day, is for a covering over you in the presence of Yahweh your God. So there's something I've been thinking about concerning this that I want to cover before I move on. The American West, and this would include, Christianity, Judaism, and other uh, religions, they have this idea of forgiveness that you commit some wrong against God, and then he's just like, no problem, don't worry about it, because you're forgiven. And it's as if it never happened before. This is a very, very wrong understanding. So this verse right here really covers it better. There is a covering. And that covering, it can be said that it's as if you've thrown your sin as far as the east is from the west, which, idiomatically would say that it's as if it didn't happen. The problem is, in the West, they act like it didn't happen. You can't bring that up. That's in the past. I've been forgiven. Okay, but Moshe, the guy that wrote the first 5 books of the Bible, at least a large portion of it, he for sure wrote the law. Whether he wrote Genesis or not, given that it's not the law, questionable. Whether he wrote the stuff about what happened after he died, questionable. So he obviously didn't write all of it, but how much of it, who knows? Well, he didn't lay it out that way. He was a murderer. One of the first things he did when he decided, however it was that he was able to decide to no longer be a slave to a slave, he was a slave to a slave according to his own writings. He was not the favored son of Pharaoh. That's nonsense. It's folklore, fable. It was never true. He wound up being a slave to a slave. And when God asked him to be the spokesman, well, that kind of threw him because, he was involved with the only language he really would have had in his younger days growing up as a slave to a slave would have been the Egyptian language. And he wouldn't have learned to speak the language like regular people. He would have learned to speak it like a trained dog: sit, stand, fetch. It would have been more along those lines. And so he's a little thrown by this. Then he goes off into the mountains and spends a lot of time there, and of course had to learn a new language. Now, what that language was, we don't know. You assume it's Hebrew because the Jews were called the Hebrews, and because Hebrew is the Jewish language, and because the Bible that we have was written in Hebrew for the most part. I mean, there is some Aramaic. But the truth is, we don't know what language he spoke. We don't know what language he wrote what he wrote. We don't know what language that was in. You know why? Because no one's ever seen it. Well, I shouldn't say ever, but nobody's seen it in, a couple thousand years at minimum. That thing disappeared, his documentation disappeared a long time ago. And what we have are copies of copies of copies of copies, and God only knows how many copies they are. We do know that in the Western world, we've been using something called the Masoretic text, which is the Hebrew text that was translated into English, that's only 1,000 years old. Then a few years back, they found the Dead Sea Scrolls, and those were 1,000 years older than the Masoretic text, and they are unbelievably similar. In fact, most of the changes that you find are dialectual, and they're not even that so much as they are. The Jews had this thing; it's been with us forever, in that we play with people's names. It's the reason why Melchizedek is spelled so many different ways in the Hebrew text, which causes it to be spelled a number of different ways in the English text. Um, Not because they didn't know how to spell his name, but because they were playing with his name, changing essentially what the name meant. In that case, they weren't trying to degrade Melchizedek. Some were trying to point out that he was God walking in human flesh. Some were trying to show that he was a mighty hero, and others, it was just a name. So they had a tendency to do that. Well, they did that with a lot of different things, and idioms get played with, and so they're spoken differently from time to place, time to time, place to place. It was stuff like that. It didn't really change the text itself. Certainly didn't change the meaning. So probably what we have is very reliable, and I think that that's a good way to look at that. So anyway, Moshe became who he became because of God, not because of who he was. And it's that way for everyone. Nobody is so awesome that they should be looked at as infallible in any way. They should not be called saints, and that's just so nonsensical. They were human beings, and they did human being things. They said bad things at times. They yelled at their wife and ignored their wife, and these are humans. They had fallibility, and God made the rules, and part of the rules were that if you will humble yourself when you realize you've done something wrong, and you will turn from that, then God will provide a covering. And that's what this is talking about. This is that day once a year that there was a covering provided for those who would truly soul search, realize what they've done right and what they've done wrong. It's important that you do both, and then get yourself back on the right path. It doesn't mean you won't wander from it. It's a very skinny path, and so stepping off of it's pretty easy, right? Staying on it gets easier as time goes on. But anyway, this is a covering. We got to stop thinking of forgiveness in the Western way and just start calling it a covering, because you're always going to be guilty of everything that you've ever done. But when you're covered, when that guilt is covered, then you're not guilty, if you will, in the eyes of God. Yeah, well, you actually are, but you've been, let's say, pardoned. Maybe we should call it pardoned instead of forgiven, because we've really taken that word a long way from what it was meant. Okay, let's kick into 29. Here's my very, very literal translation. For all the soul, S-O-U-L, that not reflect in self-same the day, the this, and shall be cut off her, or it, from peoples, in plural, her. Yeah, Hiko HaNefesh. So for every soul, Nefesh, the soul, of course we have to say the soul in Hebrew. Well, HaNefesh anyway. That's the part of you that lives on after you're body gives up, after your body, after you die, there's a part of you that will live on, and we call that the soul these days, in English anyway. That's what they used to call the vital principle. Let's see, what else do they call it? The mind as the seat of the senses, affections, and various emotions, right? It's, I think the best way to say it, it's the part of you that lives on after your physical body dies. So, which is also can be translated person, how many souls were on board or how many persons were on board, because you're counting the part that lives on. Anyway, this is Asher lo te une. So that not te une, that do not reflect. And it starts off in the English lexicon saying to bestow labor upon anything, to exercise oneself in anything. Well, it can be used that way, but not in this sentence. The next thing it says is to till the ground, to bring the earth into cultivation, to be afflicted, depressed, oppressed. So what on earth are we talking about? Well, this word in Hebrew is in something we call PL, and it's to afflict the soul. Now they say to fast, which is very wrong. Then they say, which is to shut the mouth. See, that's the problem. The word for fast in the Hebrew Bible means shut your mouth. So what happens if you shut your mouth? Well, the Jews were like, oh, well, I can't eat, so I get hungry. I have a little brother who did that. He was like 3 years old. And he was all excited. And we'd sat down at the table. I think it was Thanksgiving or something like that. Maybe Christmas. I don't know. And we were getting ready to have this big, so it was probably Thanksgiving. And he just would not shut up. He was just yammering on. And my mother finally said, Johnny, shut up. And so everybody started eating. And my mother looks up and Johnny's just sitting there. He's not eating. It's just, what's going on? Why are you not eating? And he looked at her and said, well, I can't eat with my mouth shut. So, yeah, that was the mentality of the Jews. The Bible said, God himself said, what, you think this is what I call a fast? You not eating and you laying around in sackcloth and ashes and saying, whoa, it's me. He said, no, what I call a fast is helping the homeless and the widows and the orphans. And yeah, look it up yourself. So to shut the mouth is to listen. Listen. And it's of this idea of to till the ground, to cultivate. So what are we talking about? The soul. You're tilling the ground of your soul. You're cultivating the ground of your soul. So what are you doing? This is self-reflection. And it's honest self-reflection. And it probably should hurt. Then it says, Be'etzem. Same, we usually say self-same. This is Hayom. So in this self-same day, in this same day. Hazeh, though this, in this same day. You put it all together. Be'nichreta, and shall be cut off. That's in this verse, we're talking about the soul. So if you're not reflecting, if you're not looking inside, if you're not being honest with yourself, you're to be cut off. You're in, there's a lot of misconceptions with that one as well, because people think that somebody, that the people are supposed to cut off somebody. Well, we can't do that. We don't know if someone's honestly reflecting on themselves. I mean, you experience people talking about some thing that they did wrong, and they start off admitting that they did it wrong, and the next thing you know, they're blaming somebody else for what they did wrong. That's not good self-reflection. So you can say, see there, I could tell somebody you need to be cut off from the people. No, this is something you do. If you do not take this serious, if you do not self-reflect, you need to cut yourself off from the people. If you're not going to do this on Yom Kippurim, which is what we're talking about, don't go to your synagogue. Don't hang out with God's children. Stay away from them. Then our next word, mecha, from the peoples. It's is the word for people, and this is in plural. So it's stay away from everyone. Everyone that's a child of God, everyone that's trying to do this self-reflection thing, everyone that's taking this serious and living according to what God's law is just stay away from them. All right, so here's our translation. For every person who does not reflect on his inner self, who does not occupy his soul, in this self-same day, so on Yom Kippurim, shall cut themselves off from their peoples. This verse is a good example of the shortening of the text. Verse 27 said, Ve'i nitem et nafshotechem. Reflect on your inner self, or occupy your souls. While this verse simply said, te'une. Reflect, that's all it said. Which, while the words sound different, are in fact the same words. So, because I brought this up before, and I'll, I guess, bring it up again right here. In the writing style of well, let's call it the Hebrew Bible, it's what the Christians call the Old Testament. That writing style did not require for something to be written all the way out. In legal documentations, if you have a plaintiff and his name, he's got like 4 or 5 names, you met people like that just have really long names. Or even if it's a short name, it doesn't really matter. But what they'll do is, in parentheses, it'll say hereafter, and then they'll call that person person 1. It doesn't really matter. And then they close the parentheses. So from that point on, instead of saying that guy, typing out that guy's name all the way out every time it appears in that legal document, you just type that sorry. You type that one word, or maybe you just put some letters in there, E-I-E-I-O, doesn't make any difference. But from there on, it's going to be person 1 or E-I-E-I-O to represent that thing. Well, Hebrew's not really any different. The writing style, they would shorten something. So they would take the one word that was in that long sentence, or that long phrase, and narrow it down to one word. So the problem that arises is that people who don't know this and don't understand this will see verse 27 with its long set of words as being something different from this verse, which only uses one word. That's very wrong. Okay, let's move on to 30. And my literal translation here is, and all the soul that shall make all workmanship in self same the day, the this, and make destroyed me, the soul, the she, which actually means these, from midst people. So we start off with the whole hanefesh. So, and the soul. So, and every person, let's just say it that way, right? Every person, every soul, part of you that lives on, every person, which is followed by asher ta'aseh. See what's on next. Which is followed by kol melacha. Okay, I wanted to go back and see if it actually said that. I wasn't sure. So every person that ta'aseh, that's from asal, it's to labor, to work about anything, to make, to produce by labor, to manufacture. So everyone who does something, right? They're doing something, and it's of course labor related here, which is then followed by kol melacha. So from anyone who does any melacha properly to service, hence to work, prescribed to anyone. So anyone who's involved in this servile work, anyone who went to work that day, no matter what it was, they went to work. The etzem, so in that self-same hayom, in that self-same day, Isaiah, there it is, v'ha'avati, that's literally, and make destroyed me. To be lost, to lose oneself, to wander, especially used of a lost and wandering sheep. See, they use this word destroyed, and it's not wrong, but the understanding has really become very convoluted. God is not saying that he is going to destroy somebody. Because if we were being destroyed for everything that we did wrong, there'd be a lot less people in this world. God's not doing that. And it's not him doing it, it's him saying, you're destroying yourself. And how do you destroy yourself? Well, you wander away from God. Because God's telling you, on this day, you will not work. So what happens when you work? Well, one, you have to separate yourselves from God. And two, by separating yourselves from God, you're like a lost and wandering sheep going off into the wilderness. And guess what's going to happen to that sheep if the predators find it? This word is also, and this is where you get the idea of destroyed. It's also used of men and other living creatures as perishing. Also used of a land and houses which are laid waste, metaphorically, of hopes and wishes and desires being frustrated. To be destroyed, biblically speaking, is to be utterly separated from God. And God's telling you, you're doing this to yourself. This is et hanefesh, so pointing to the soul, the person. Hahiv, these persons. Mi kerev. This is from the midst. You're from the midst. Does it say hot? No. So it's Mikarev is from the middle or the interior, or from the midst of Ama, which is the people. Is your masculine, Ama is your feminine. And when you're speaking of a group, it's supposed to be feminine. That's the rule there. So our translation, and every person who shall do any occupational labor on this, the self same day. So we're still talking about Yom Kippurim. These souls are laid waste from me. That's how God was actually saying it. These souls are laid waste from me, and from the midst of the people. At some point, probably during the Dark Ages, the idea of occupying our souls, in other words, self-reflection, had become fasting. It's because you think about it. Oh, Rob, the Bible actually talks about it. You brought it up a while ago. Is this what I call a fast? No, this is not what I call a fast. So see, it goes all the way back. Not exactly. You think the Jews just kept doing it because after God told them that's not what a fast was? Well, let's move a little further away when the Jews are completely away from the temple and completely away from Judaism and have to just make it up on their own, which is essentially what the sages did, particularly in the Dark Ages. It became fasting. Add to that the misapplication of two types of work, because remember we spoke about this previously, how they turned one type of work into hard labor, the malcha into hard labor, and the avodah into easy labor for whatever reason. You get that wrong. And then you add to that the complete lack of understanding of Hebrew grammar. The sages had gone far afield of the meaning of this verse. They wrote that God would only slightly punish people who ate on this day of fasting, but would harshly punish, in other words, destroy a person who worked on this day. There is no actual connection here to the interpretation of the sages. They are wrong. Not all of them said that, by the way. Some of them either stayed silent on it or got some of it right. Okay. So it's moving on to 32, the literal English. All workmanship, not you shall make they, statute eternal to generations, you all, in all dwellings, you. Kol melacha, so any and all workmanship, craftsmanship, and we get this idea that it's something physical. No, if you're an attorney and you're working on this day, hello, this applies to you. Oh, but I'm sitting there typing on a typewriter. No, it's any kind of work, whatever the work is. Lo ta'asu. Here we go with the labor, the making something, doing whatever it is you do. A work maybe someone else does to make a living. But then it says hukat. Well, that's a statute. That's an actual law. Then it says olam. Oh, it's an eternal law. Oh, wait. But when the Christian Messiah shows up, he wipes away all the law. Oh, no, he did not. He said he didn't. But, Christians know better than him, I guess. But it's an eternal law. It's not going to go away ever. And then it says, le'adovrotehim, to all of your generations. It's eternal. It's going to cover everyone. Whoever lived, whoever will live. It's never going to go away. The whole in all mishvotechem, in all your dwellings. It doesn't make any difference where you live. you're still under that law. That's what they just said. Moshe, anyway. So we have, you shall not do any of your occupational labor. This is an eternal statute to every generation in any of your dwellings. This command against labor appears in verse 28. You shall not do any of your occupational labor in the self same day, because it is Yom Kippurim, is the day of coverings. It is, speaking of this day, it is for a covering over you in the presence of Yahweh. So here we are, we're getting it again, right? So as you can imagine, sages ask why this verse repeats the command against labor. They came up with the idea that it was added to somehow prove that the Jews everywhere, even if there is no temple or temple priest, must observe this command. While the sages are right to believe that everywhere, even if there is no temple and temple priests must observe this command, they are right about that part. The addition of this command does no such thing. Their conclusion is right, but what brought them to that conclusion is completely wrong, because they had no idea, none whatsoever. The addition of this command, I already said that. The writing style of the Torah is based on the Mesopotamian writing style. Words, phrases, sentences, and even entire passages are repeated because the first occurrence is an overview, while the second occurrence is usually a detailed explanation, and the last occurrence is a summation. Then, on top of that, there is an additional reason for repeating something, and that is called association. So if something is associated to what you're talking about now, even though you've already said it 2 or 3 times, there is an association, and that word or phrase or entire sentence will be repeated, so that you don't have to go back and figure out which scroll that information was in. I mean, that's a possibility. I'm sure that would have really helped. Instead of you having to look at the bottom and, okay, well, here's, it says to go look up in Joe Schmo's fine scroll of Leviticus, it will, but that burned up in a fire 20 years ago, right? I mean, who knows? That was just the writing style of the time. The repeat. So this idea that the Torah was a conglomeration of a whole bunch of different writings of the Torah is nonsense, absolute nonsense. You can go read Umberto Moshe Casuto. He was a professor at Hebrew University. Read his book, his commentary on Genesis and Exodus. He didn't live long enough to finish the rest of the commentary, but boy, he lays out those grammar rules very, very well. So if you haven't done that and you think maybe I'm making this stuff up, go read that. It'll really help you to understand why there's so much repeating in the Hebrew Bible. There's purpose. He explains the reasons why sometimes God is called El, sometimes Adonai, sometimes Yahweh. He was never called Yahweh. There is no W in the Hebrew language. He's certainly never called Jehovah. That'd be difficult, since there is no J in the Hebrew language either. But I don't. All right, so where do we go to? 32. It says Shabbaton. He he to you, and occupy your souls your, in night to new moon, in evening, from evening to evening, Shabbat they, Shabbat you. A lot of Shabbating going on in this one verse. Okay, so we have Shabbat, Shabbaton, Hu Lachem. So we have, let's just say for now, Sabbath, Sabbaths. It will be to you. It will be to you Sabbath, Sabbaths. It will be to you a rest of rest. R-E-S-T-S. Lots of rest, right? It can be that way. Or it can be a monumental Sabbath, which is why it's written, the word Sabbath is written twice in a row. In Hebrew, we don't say Shabbat, Shabbat. We say Shabbat, Shabbaton. That doesn't mean there's a whole bunch of Sabbaths, just because the second word is plural. It just means that this is an important one. This is a big one. This is a very meaningful day of rest. Okay? Then it says, Ve'initem. That's the occupy your soul. That's the looking inside. That's the self-reflection. This is a very important day for this self-reflection. This is et nafshotehem, so that's nefesh is your basic word here. Your soul. Your soul. This is the day, the very important, probably the most important day for you to reflect on your soul. Tisha, so that's in the ninth, lachodesh, in the ninth new moon. So we think of that in the ninth. That's not the ninth month on the Gregorian calendar. So if you have an American calendar hanging on your wall, it's not going to help you out. This is the biblical calendar, right? So on the ninth new moon, be'erev, at evening, me'erev, so you got in evening, from evening. So it's from evening to evening, the way we would think of it. Well, then they have, you have me'erev, from evening ad, which is to or until erev. So it's evening, from the evening to, in other words, when the sun goes down on Friday night till the sun goes down on Saturday night, that's evening to evening. Now, this will not always be on a Saturday. It could be start on Monday and end on Tuesday. And you should know by now that happens, right? And so, yes, a Sabbath can happen any day of the week. It is a day of rest. We have the basic Sabbath that happens every week from sundown to Friday to sundown to Saturday. But again, it can happen any day of the week and does, especially with the feasts themselves. So then you have Tish Betu. The basic word here is Shabbat. So shall, this take added to the front that makes the t sound, Tish, instead of sh. They've added the take, so it becomes Tish Betu. So the oo at the end makes it they. So this is a command. The T sound being added to the front of this word makes it a command. You will rest. And then it says Shabachem. So we have Tish Shabachem. I said that wrong a while ago. So you have Shabbat, Shabbaton. But it sounds different because the command has been added to it. Okay? So my translation. It is a major Sabbath to you. and you will reflect on your inner self. In the ninth new moon, from evening to evening, you shall rest on your Sabbath. So again, melacha is the word for labor, is for work or occupation. Occupation is the right word. Jewish Rab Samson Raphael Hirsch lived from June 20th, 1808 through December 31st of 1888, if you care. Compared the Hebrew word melacha to malach, which is, of course, the root word, both of which came from the same root, la'ach, which means to send a messenger. He went on to argue that since malach was connected to the idea of messengers from God, in other words, messengers from heaven, as opposed to humans, and thus this word was used to indicate a higher form of labor than that of eved, which speaks of a slave, which he then, of course, connected to menial labor. Shabbaton Shabbat, or Shabbat Shabbaton. Biblical Hebrew did not have grammatical notation. So in place of what we think of as an exclamation mark, the Bible uses the same word twice. In this case, the first occurrence of the word was written in plural to indicate continuance of the word. In other words, the Sabbath celebration will endlessly be celebrated each year, while the second occurrence of the word was simply written in the singular. So we don't write a word or even two words in the middle of a sentence, or even, or especially at the beginning of the sentence, put an exclamation mark and continue with the sentence, because the exclamation mark in our language goes at the end of a sentence. So to say Sabbath, Sabbath is not, that's not a sentence, right? And you kind of have that same problem here when you're trying to understand this. They're trying, so it's better to say a major Sabbath, because that gets the point across, than it is to say Sabbath with an exclamation point, because that's what you'd be down to. One word with an exclamation point is supposed to be a whole sentence. Doesn't work, does it? All right, so we're going to now be moving into yet another topic. Subject has not changed, but we know it's a new topic because it says Ve'adaber Yahweh el Moshe lemor, and you know what that means. I have just stopped even translating that. Well, not translating, but I've stopped going through it. And Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, this indicates a new topic, maybe a bullet point in the same document. That's all you get. So where are we going from there? Well, literal English for, where are we at? 34. Speak to the children of Israel to say in 15, because we say 15 in English, but in Hebrew it's 5 followed by the word for teen, 15. In 15 day to new moon the 7th, this feast the Sukkot 7 days la Yahweh. So daber, that's the arranging in order, the writing it out, rewriting it, making sure that what you just wrote down is really, really good direction, right? It should lead and guide. Maybe you have to say, okay, point number 1, blah, 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 or step number 1, blah, 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 step number 2, blah, 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 right? This is to be very careful about what you're saying. Don't just blurt something out. Make sure it leads people to something. And then it says El, which means to, B'nai Yisrael. So say this to the children of Israel, or make them understand it anyway. Lemor, Now, this is a little different. This is where you shed light on the subject. So, if our first word is to give directions, well, you know what men do? Yeah, they throw them away. And then their wife has to, le mort, the woman has to explain it to the man. Ba chamisha. So that's in 5 asar. So in 15. So 15. In the 15th yom. In the 15th day. La chodesh. So that's in the 15th day of the new moon. Ha shevi'i, the 7th. So it's either the 7th new moon on the 15th day, or it's the 15th new moon on the 7th day. Which way do you think it is? Anyway, Chag. That's the word for feast. It's a festival. It's to keep a festival. It's used at the Feast of Tabernacles, the feast, whatever feast. We always say Chag Sameach, whatever the name of the thing is, right? But this is from that idea of spinning around in a circle. You've seen Jews do that. Certainly, if you're not Jewish and not hanging around Jews, you've at least seen a movie where the Jews are all holding hands and spinning in a circle. They get that from this word, because this is all about celebration. Ha Sukkot. So this is the feast, the dancing in a circle of Sukkot. Now, Sukkot, they say it's a booth. It's made of leaves and branches and interwoven and blah, blah, blah. Well, they say that because during Sukkot, we do this. We get the leaves and the branches and all of that. And the idea that the stuff's supposed to be made out of that stuff is not biblical. It has become a thing, but the children of Israel, when they left and wandered through a desert for 40 years, where did they get all of this stuff? Anyway. So it's the Shabat, which is 7 Yamim. So 7 days. La Yahweh, to Yahweh or for Yahweh. And that's all it says in Hebrew. So what does it say in English? Speak to the children of Israel and say, in the 15th day of the 7th new moon is the Feast of Sukkot. 7 days to Yahweh. So now we know that on the 7th month, on the 15th day, we have this festival, this party called Sukkot. And it lasts for 7 full days. 7 days. Lays it out pretty sharp, right? So we can compare that to Shemot, which is also called Exodus 23:16, and the Hag HaKetzir, the Feast of the Harvest, of the Bikurei, of the first fruits of your labors that you shall sow in the field, and Hag HaAsif, the Feast of Ingathering, which is at the end of the year when you have gathered from your field. Feast of the Harvest. Rashi said the Feast of the Harvest is Shavuot, called Pentecost by Christians. The first fruits are brought to the sanctuary. Feast of the Ingatherings. Rashi said that the Feast of the Ingatherings was Sukkot, Tabernacles as it's more commonly known, and marks the time when we bring the fruit into our barn to protect it from the rainy season. It's kind of right, but what's the rain going to hurt your apple orchard? The apples you gather from the orchard. What's the rain going to do to harm your grapes that you pulled in from your grapevines? Because it's not just of the wheat. This is whatever you grow. Now, you can understand that you don't want your paycheck getting all wet before you get it in the bank, right? Because that's also your harvest. So it's a very narrow idea here. Even Ezra and Saporno point out that this is the end of the agricultural year, not the calendar year. But where you live. It's not about agriculture. Your first fruit offering is what? Anyway, we're not talking first fruits here, but that was, somebody compared it to that. Who was it? Well, Rossi did, the Feast of the Harvest. See, they've gotten this idea that we're gathering in our harvest and we're thanking, God for the harvest and all that. And certainly you would, when you gather in your harvest, you'd be thankful to God. But that's where the first fruit comes in, and that's 2 small loaves of bread. That's your actual offering. We've already gone over that. So, how long is this one? We can probably get through this one if I push. In verse 35, it says, very literal in English, in day the first, convocation holy, all work service, not you shall make day. Bayom, in the day, ha rishon. So that's the first. So on the first day or in the first day, doesn't matter. Mikra Kodesh. You're going to have a holy meeting. And that meeting, just because it's holy, doesn't mean it's supposed to be boring. We've just been told that this is supposed to be a party. What does it mean by holy? It means it's set aside. We're going to do this every year. And that it's set aside and it's for God, so it's a holy assembly of the people. Then it says, Kol Melachet, so any and all work, Avodah, and Israel work. Can we say it that way? Sure, we can. Lo ta'asu, you will not do it. You're not going to work it. You're not going to lift a finger to do it. So the translation, on the first day will be a holy meeting. You shall not do any of your occupational labor. So, didn't you say this already? Well, yeah, but we're on a different holiday now. Where I just really can't push it any closer than this. I'm out of time. We'll pick up a 36 next week. Shalom, shalom.
The blessing, vaYiqra. Yevarecha Yahweh v'yish merecha. Ya'er Yahweh panai v'lecha v'hunecha. Yisa Yahweh panai v'lecha v'yasim lecha shalom. And in English, may Yahweh cause you to lie down so that you may rest. May he touch and caress you. May he prepare you for what is ahead. May he watch over you. May he keep you from harm. May he cause goodness to grow in you and take away the bad. May he arrange your life and cause you to flourish. May he cheer you up and gladden your heart. May he cause his light to shine through you. May he show you tenderness and favor and love in his presence. May he show you kindness and be delicate towards you. May he show you his generosity, mercy, compassion, and desire for you as it comes forth from the depths of his soul. May he lift you out of your pit and deliver you from the things that hold you prisoner. May he draw you to his chest and cast his eyes on yours. May he show you his love and desire for you as he cradles you in his arms. May he bear your punishment and pardon you of your sin. May he take you for his bride. May he establish a foundation in you. May he place his name on your heart and mind and make your body his temple. May you be his treasure. May you always be on his mind. May he draw you near and comfort you when you are afraid. May he assure you there is nothing to fear because he is with you. May you and all that concerns you be at peace because he is your friend. Amen.